Okay, so get this. Ready for a deep dive into a cold case that is just truly, truly bizarre.
Always up for a good mystery. Hit me with it.
It's one you've probably heard of, at least by reputation. Hinterkaifeck, 1922. Rural Bavaria, Germany. Gruesome doesn't even begin to describe it.
Hinterkaifeck. Yeah, that one sticks with you. Isolated farmstead, brutal murders, the whole 9 yards. What's the angle for our deep dive today?
Well, for starters, it's been over a century, and this thing is still ice cold, unsolved. And the details, man, the details, they're just so weird. So we're going to lay it all out, all the facts, the theories, the what ifs, try to make sense of why this one still haunts people.
Sounds like a plan. Let's get into it.
Okay, so picture this, right? You're in the Bavarian countryside, early 1920s. We're talking pre-World War II, Germany, rural, quiet. And nestled in there is this small farmstead, Hinterkaifeck. Pretty isolated, even for the time.
I've seen pictures of Hinterkaifeck. Definitely off the beaten path, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And get this, less than a year after what happened there, they demolished the whole thing, tore it down, wiped it off of the map.
Wow. I mean, I guess given what happened there, you can't blame them, but still. Erasing the place entirely kind of adds to the creep factor, doesn't it?
It does. And here's the thing, right? During that demolition, they found even more fuel for the mystery fire. Up in the attic, tucked away, a mattock, caked with dried blood. And in the barn, a penknife just laying in the hay.
Okay, so the mattock, that's not surprising. Brutal head wounds on all the victims. But why hide it in the attic? Why not ditch it somewhere far away? And the penknife, that's just weird. Whose was it? Why was it there?
Exactly. Those are the kinds of questions that have been swirling around this case for, well, forever. And get this, it wasn't just the crime scene itself that was creepy. In the months leading up to it, all sorts of strange stuff was happening at Hinterkaifeck. Like, for instance, the family's made up and quit 6 months before the murders. Said she kept hearing noises in the attic, convinced the place was haunted.
Right. That's a pretty common thread in these kinds of stories, isn't it? A sense of unease, some bad vibes in the house before things go south.
Yeah, definitely adds to the whole atmosphere. But it gets weirder. In March, just weeks before everything went down, Andres Gruber, the patriarch of the family, he finds a newspaper on his property. From Munich, which is, not exactly next door. Thing is, nobody in the family subscribed to it. Nobody they knew did either.
So someone was poking around, someone they didn't know. That's definitely not a good sign.
Not at all. And then, hold on, it gets even weirder. Days before the murders, Gruber tells his neighbors about this really strange thing. He found tracks in the snow leading from the woods straight to the machine house where the lock had been broken. And then, he and the family started hearing footsteps in the attic. Clear as day, but nobody up there when he checked.
Oh, man, that's just creepy. I'd be out of there. Did he call the police?
Nope. Told people about it, but never reported it. And get this, refused any offers of help, too. Really strange.
So strange. I mean, what was he thinking? Was he scared of something specific? It's like he knew something bad was coming, but wouldn't or couldn't do anything about it.
Right. It's just so bizarre. But anyway, so Friday, March 31st, 1922. This new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrives at the farm to start work. Her sister walks her there, last person to see them alive outside of the family itself. Just a horrible, horrible coincidence.
So new maid, first day on the job, walks right into, well, whatever happened next. Do we know exactly how it all went down?
It's pieced together, but yeah, pretty grim. Seems like sometime that evening, Victoria, Gruber's daughter, her little girl, Cecilia, and both her parents were lured out to the barn. Maybe something with the animals, who knows? And that's where it happened. One by one, they were murdered, each one with a blow to the head from the mattock they kept on the farm. Just brutal.
God, that's awful. And the others, the little boy and the maid?
After the barn, it seems the killer went into the house. Little Joseph, he was only 2, killed in his crib. And Maria Baumgartner in her bedroom, same weapon.
And then silence for days.
4 days. 4 days before anybody realizes anything is wrong. First, the coffee sellers show up on Saturday like they always do. Nobody answers. They see the gate to the machine house is open, which was weird, but they eventually just leave. Then little Cecilia, she doesn't show up for school on Monday. And nobody from the family was at church on Sunday. People start talking.
It's a small community, right? So people notice when a whole family just disappears.
Absolutely. So Wednesday rolls around, April 4th. This mechanic, Albert Hoffner, goes to the farm to fix a broken engine. Doesn't see anyone, just hears the animals inside the barn and the dog. Waits around for an hour, does the repair, still nothing.
At that point, it's got to be pretty clear something seriously wrong has happened.
Yeah, so finally, this guy, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, he's the one who really kicks off the whole discovery. He sends his son and stepson over to check on the farm since nobody's seen them, and when they find nothing, he goes over himself that afternoon with a couple other guys. And in the barn, well, they find the bodies. Andreas and Cecilia Gruber, Victoria, and little Celia all piled together.
Awful. Just awful. And then they find the maid and the baby inside the house, right?
Yeah, shortly after. Horrific scene. And right there, the investigation hits its first snag. Because with so many people going in and out, the crime scene is already messed up before the police even get there.
Contaminated, basically.
Yeah.
It's got to make things harder for the
Oh,
investigators.
for sure. But they do their best. Autopsies done right there in the barn confirmed the mattock was the weapon. And here's where it gets even more heartbreaking. Little Cecilia, she was alive for some time after the attack. They found tufts of her own hair clutched in her hand like she was pulling it out in pain. Just awful.
That's just, I can't even imagine. So they have the murder weapon, they have the timeline. Did they ever figure out the motive?
That's the thing. Robbery, which was the first thought, that went out the window pretty quick because they found a whole bunch of money in the house, untouched.
So, not a robbery, which means someone stayed there
Yeah.
on that farm
Yeah.
for days with those bodies.
Yep. Fed the animals, ate all the bread in the house, even butchered some meat from the pantry. Like it was just another day. That's the detail that gets to people, you know? What kind of person does that?
Chilling. Absolutely chilling.
Yeah.
So we've got a secluded farmstead, a family brutally murdered, and a killer who just hangs out at the scene for days. Sounds like a horror movie.
Right. But it gets even weirder. There are all these inconsistencies, things that don't quite add up. Like the initial thought was maybe the family was lured to the barn by some noise from the animals. But when they tried to recreate that, they found you couldn't even hear someone shouting from the barn inside the house.
So how did they get them out there? Someone must have done something.
Right? Exactly. And then there's this really strange story from one of the guys who found the bodies, Michael Plickel. 3 days after the murders, the night before the bodies were found, he walks past Hinterkaifeck, and he sees the oven in the house is lit. As he gets closer, somebody comes out with a lantern and shines it right in his face, blinds him temporarily.
What? Hold on, so there was someone else there. Days after the murders.
That's what he said. And he also said there was this awful, like, revolting smell of smoke coming from the fireplace, like something was being burned.
And nobody followed up on that. That seems like a huge lead.
Nope. Never investigated. It's crazy, right? So many weird details, and they just kind of ignored them.
I mean, maybe they had their reasons, but from where we're sitting, it's frustrating. It's like they were handed clues on a silver platter and didn't even bother to taste the food.
Exactly. And there's more. On the Saturday after the murders, really early in the morning, this local farmer, Simon Reislander, he's walking home and sees two figures by the woods near the farm. As soon as they see him, they turn away, like they don't want to be seen. Later, after the news breaks, he starts to think maybe those were the guys involved.
So more unexplained figures lurking around. This is getting more and more like a Scooby-Doo episode by the minute.
Right. And then 5 years later, 1927, completely out of the blue, some stranger in a nearby town stops a guy in the street, asks about the Hinterkaifeck murders, then yells, "I'm the killer," and runs off into the woods.
Okay, that's just weird. I mean, was he messing with people? Was he actually involved?
Yeah.
Did they ever catch him?
Nobody knows. He was never identified. Just another weird detail added to the pile. So we've got the scene, we've got the weird stuff leading up to it, and all these unexplained events afterward. Now let's talk suspects. And remember, this is all theory, right? Nobody was ever convicted, so we're just laying out the possibilities.
Right, just exploring the different avenues that investigators went down. And honestly, with a case this bizarre, I'm all ears.
Okay, first up, Carl Gabriel. He was Victoria's husband, officially declared killed in World War I in 1914, but they never found his body.
Okay, so right off the bat, we've got a potential return from the dead scenario. Classic mystery trope.
Exactly. And people were already gossiping because Victoria had little Joseph a few years after Carl supposedly died. The rumor was that Joseph was actually Andreas Gruber's son, you know, Victoria's own father. Apparently, they had even been convicted of incest before.
Whoa. Okay, that's a lot to unpack. So, troubled family history, on top of a potentially fake death. Does anything concrete ever come up about Carl?
Well, after World War II, a few German POWs who were released said that a German-speaking Soviet officer in their camp bragged about being the Hinterkaifeck killer. And some folks thought maybe that was Carl Gabriel. There were rumors he wanted to go to Russia after the war.
Interesting. But was there any proof?
Not really. Some of the guys who said they heard the confession, they changed their stories later, so take that with a grain of salt. But it's still out there, the possibility that Carl Gabriel was the one.
Okay, so potentially fake death, maybe went to Russia, maybe came back and murdered his family, or not. What about other suspects?
Right, so next we have Lorenz Schlittenbauer, remember him? The guy who found the bodies.
Yeah, the one who went into the house alone before anyone else. What's the story there?
Well, when they got to the farm, the barn door was locked and they had to force it open. But then, after they find the bodies in the barn, Schlittenbauer unlocks the house door with a key and goes in by himself.
Hold on, so he had a key. Why?
Nobody really knows. He said he was looking for his son, Joseph. But, it's a little suspicious. And get this, in the days before the murders, a house key went missing from the farm.
Okay, now that's really suspicious. Plus, he was the first one in the house, so he could have messed with the crime scene, right?
Exactly. And some people thought maybe he did it because Victoria was asking him for money to support Joseph. There were rumors that he was the father.
Ah, so another paternity mystery. Lots of tangled relationships in this case. Did they ever pin anything on him?
Nope. He actually sued a bunch of people for slander because they said he was the killer and won. So officially he was cleared. But there's still that cloud of suspicion hanging over him.
Yeah, I can see why. Okay, who's next on our list of potential Hinterkaifeck culprits?
Okay, so next we have a pair of brothers, Adolf and Anton Gump. Now, Adolf was part of this right-wing paramilitary group, the Freikorps Oberland, and there were rumors that he was involved in some killings in Poland the year before.
So, a guy with a violent past, potentially connected to some shady organizations, definitely fits the profile.
Right. And in 1951, their sister, Crescentia Mayer, she's on her deathbed and confesses that Adolf and Anton were the ones who did it.
Wow, deathbed confession. That's pretty dramatic. Did they arrest them?
Well, Adolf was already dead by then, died during World War II, but they did arrest Anton. However, they let him go because they didn't have any real proof, just the sister's word.
So, a strong accusation, but ultimately not enough to convict. It's like they keep getting so close, but something's always missing.
Exactly. And that's pretty much the story of the whole Hinterkaifeck investigation. Lots of leads, lots of theories, but nothing solid enough to close the case.
Okay, so we had the possibly not dead husband, the guy who found the bodies acting shady, the violent brother with a deathbed confession. Who else is in the running?
Well, there's another pair of brothers, Carl and Andreas S. They came up because in 1971, a woman wrote a letter saying her mom told her that the mother of these two brothers confessed to her that her sons did it.
Hold on, so we're talking about a rumor passed down through 2 generations. That's a pretty thin thread.
It is. But here's where it gets interesting. Remember the penknife they found when they demolished the farm? Well, the former maid said she saw a similar knife in the farmyard before the murders, and the rumor was that Andreas S. was really upset about losing his penknife around that time.
Okay, so we've got a lost knife that might match the one found at the scene. That's a pretty big coincidence.
Right. But again, no way to prove it was actually his knife, and they never really got anywhere with investigating them. So, another dead end.
Man, this case is full of them. It's like every time they get a lead, it just fizzles out. So who else is on our Hinterkaifeck lineup?
All right, next up is a guy named Peter Weber. He got dragged into it because a guy he used to work with, Joseph Betts, said that Weber talked about this isolated farm, which turned out to be Hinterkaifeck, and even suggested they kill the old man and steal the money.
So we've got a witness saying this guy was thinking about robbing and murdering the family. Sounds like a pretty good suspect to me.
Yeah, but again, it's just one guy's word against his. No other evidence connecting him to the farm or the murders. So it's basically hearsay.
Frustrating, isn't it?
Ugh.
All these pieces, but they never quite fit together. All right, what else have we got?
Okay, now we get to the Bichler brothers, Anton and Carl, and their possible accomplice, Georg Siegel. Now, this whole theory comes from the former maid, Crescens Reiger, the one who quit because she thought the place was haunted.
Right, right. She seemed to have a bad feeling about a lot of people. What made her suspicious of the Bislers?
Well, she said Anton, he'd worked on the farm before, so he knew the layout. And she said he always talked about the family and even said a few times that they should be dead. And get this, the farm dog, who would bark at anyone, never barked at Anton.
Okay, that is kind of creepy, like the dog knew something was up with him.
Right. And one night, she saw someone lurking outside her window and thought it was Carl Bichler, so she was pretty convinced they were involved.
What about George Siegel? How does he fit in?
He used to work on the farm too, and he knew they kept money in the house. And here's the kicker. He admitted to carving the handle of the mattock that was used as the murder weapon.
Hold on, seriously. That's a pretty big piece of the puzzle.
It is. He also admitted to breaking into the house a couple of years before and stealing some stuff. But he swore up and down that he had nothing to do with the murders.
So, a guy with a history of theft on the farm, who made the murder weapon, claims he's innocent. Seems a little hard to believe.
Yeah, but again, no real proof to connect him to the murders themselves, so he stays on the list of possible suspects.
This is just, man, so many possibilities, but so little certainty. It's like they were drowning in suspects but couldn't find a single life raft.
Exactly. Okay, last suspect group, the Thaler brothers. The former maid, Crescens Reiger, she was suspicious of them too, said that one night, Joseph Thaler came to her window asking all these questions about the family and their money. And he had someone with him who was really interested in the machine house.
So, more potential casing of the joint. It's like everyone in the village was a suspect at some point.
It really is kind of like that. But as with most of the other suspects, no real evidence to tie them to the crime itself.
Okay, so we've gone through a whole laundry list of potential killers.
Yeah.
Any other theories, or is that it?
Okay, so this last one is a bit more recent and a lot more out there. This author, Bill James, he has this theory that the Hinterkaifeck murders were actually done by a German serial killer who was active in the U.S. around the turn of the century. This guy, Paul Mueller.
Whoa, hold on. U.S. serial killer. Now we're really getting into conspiracy theory territory.
I know, right? But hear him out. He wrote this whole book, The Man from the Train, where he talks about all these similarities between the Hinterkaifeck murders and the murders Mueller was suspected of in the U.S. Isolated families, killed with a blunt farm tool, bodies stacked a certain way, no robbery.
Okay, that's specific. And what's the connection to Germany?
Mueller was a German immigrant, and his killings in the U.S. just kind of stopped around 1912. So James thinks maybe he went back to Germany and kept on killing.
Interesting theory, but how would you even begin to prove that? It seems like a massive stretch.
It is, but it's out there, and it does kind of make you think. Anyway, the point is, even after all this time, all these investigations, all these theories, we still don't know who did it.
Yeah, and it's not like nobody cared. This case is famous, infamous, really. Books, articles, documentaries, even a novel. People are still fascinated by it.
They are. It's just one of those mysteries that grabs hold and doesn't let go. And you know, in 2007, they had some police academy students review the case as a training exercise. They actually thought the original investigation was pretty good for its time. But of course, back then, they weren't doing things like fingerprinting, which was already standard in 1922.
So they missed out on some key forensic evidence that could have made all the difference.
Exactly. But here's the crazy part. All these students, working separately, they all came to the same conclusion about who the most likely suspect was.
So even with fresh eyes and modern knowledge, one person stood out.
That's amazing. Did they say who it was?
They wouldn't say out of respect for the families involved, so we still don't know for sure. But it does make you wonder.
Yeah, it really does. So to everyone listening, we've laid out the case, all the twists and turns, the suspects, the dead ends. Now it's your turn. We want to hear from you.
Exactly. What do you think? What detail, what clue, what piece of this whole puzzle sticks out to you? And why? Maybe you've spotted something everyone else missed. Maybe you have a theory nobody's thought of before.
Because after all these years, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved. But that doesn't mean we can't keep searching for answers, keep discussing, keep thinking critically about this case.
Exactly. So let's keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts, your insights, your theories. Who knows, maybe together we can finally shed some light on this dark, dark mystery.